Imagine waking up every morning with dirt in your mouth, not dust, not food, actual dirt, wet, cold, fresh from the ground. At first you think it's just a weird dream, but then you check the footage and you're not in your bed for most of the night. So where do you go and who or what brings you back? Every morning I wake up with dirt in my mouth. It's not just a strange taste or the sensation of dry air. It's real, coarse, gritty soil. The first time it happened, I thought maybe it was dust from the ceiling or something that got blown in through the window overnight. I got up, brushed my teeth twice and went about my day trying to forget the strange texture and the bitterness that lingered on my tongue. But the next morning it happened again. More dirt, more grit, more confusion. My lips were cracked and stained, and when I coughed, tiny particles of earth scattered onto my sheets. It wasn't just a one-off. It kept happening, day after day, like clockwork. I started waking up in the middle of the night, choking on the dry clumps that clung to the back of my throat. The first few times, I'd stumble out of bed, spit into the sink, and stare at the brown mess swirling in the drain, wondering if I was losing my mind. I began to inspect my room more closely, thinking maybe something was falling from the ceiling or maybe the vent was blowing in dirt from outside. But there was nothing. No cracks, no dust trails, nothing on the furniture or the windowsills, just me lying there in the morning, mouth full of earth. Like I had been face down in a grave, I changed my sheets. I vacuumed every corner of my room. I even called pest control, thinking some animal might be nesting nearby and kicking up soil into the air. They found nothing. No signs of infestation, no mold, no structural issues. Everything was clean, silent, still. And yet every morning the same thing. Dirt between my teeth, soil clinging to the insides of my cheeks, sometimes small pebbles, and once even a thin root tangled on my tongue. It didn't make sense. I wasn't eating in bed. I wasn't gardening. I lived alone, in an apartment with no plants, no yard, no reason for soil to be anywhere near my face, let alone in my mouth as I slept. I started to obsess over it. I'd wake up in a panic, reaching for the lamp, running my fingers across my pillow, checking my tongue for grit, inspecting the corners of my lips. I set alarms every few hours to wake myself up and check, but I could never catch it happening. I'd fall asleep, and when I opened my eyes again, the dirt would be there. Dry and grainy one day, damp and dark the next, like it had just been, scooped fresh from the earth. My pillowcases became stained. My toothbrush bristles grew darker. I bought a mouthguard thinking maybe that would help. It didn't. My sleep started to deteriorate. I'd toss and turn, afraid of what I'd find in the morning. Some nights I refused to sleep altogether, staying up with the lights on, eyes wide open, hoping that staying conscious would keep it from happening. But eventually exhaustion always won. I'd drift off, and when I woke, dirt, always dirt. It felt like a message, but I couldn't understand what it was trying to say. My dreams became murky, filled with muffled voices and the sensation of being pulled downward deeper and deeper, like the earth was swallowing me whole. The smell began to follow me. That cold, earthy scent of damp soil started to cling to my skin, even during the day. People at work asked if I'd been gardening, and I'd laugh it off, even though I hadn't touched a plant in years. The scent wouldn't go away no matter how many times I showered. I started to notice small specks of dirt in my nails, even though I hadn't been outside. After weeks of waking up with dirt in my mouth, I decided I needed proof. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't keep blaming it on stress or sleepwalking without knowing for sure. I bought a small camera, nothing fancy, just something I could set up on a tripod in the corner of my room. I angled it toward my bed, making sure the whole mattress was in the frame. I checked the battery, made sure the SD card was empty, and turned it on just before lying down for the night. There was a strange comfort in knowing the lens was watching. Maybe now I'd finally catch myself in the act. Maybe I'd finally understand what was happening during those lost hours. The next morning I woke up the same as before, mouth dry, tongue coated in thick, wet dirt. My pillow had brown smears on it, and the sheets were damp in spots. I felt sick. But instead of brushing it off like usual, I jumped out of bed and went straight for the camera. I rewound the footage, watching the timestamp tick backward until it reached the moment I turned out the lights and climbed under the blanket. For the first hour or so, I didn't move at all. Just normal sleep, shifting slightly, breathing, steadily. Then just past 2:30 a.m. something strange happened. One moment I was lying there peacefully and the next the frame was empty. I didn't sit up. I didn't throw off the covers or walk away. I was just gone. The blanket still looked like it had been disturbed, but my body wasn't in the bed. It was as if I had been erased. The camera kept rolling, no jumps, no glitches. Minutes passed, then an hour, then another. The bed stayed empty, the room still, the light from the hallway casting a soft glow across the carpet. Nothing moved. No sound, no explanation. And then, around 5:47 a.m., I was suddenly there again. The frame showed me lying exactly where I had been before. Same position, same blanket pulled halfway over me. It was like I had never left, like someone had pressed rewind and dropped me back into place. I stared at the footage for hours, rewinding and replaying the same sequence, looking for any clue, any hint of how I disappeared and reappeared without making a sound. I checked the time codes, checked the storage, even downloaded the clip to make sure it wasn't corrupted. But everything was clean. The camera had captured every second. It just didn't explain what had happened. That day I couldn't focus on anything else. The mystery kept eating at me. Where did I go? What was happening to me during those hours? I was missing. And why was there always dirt in my mouth when I came back? The next night I repositioned the camera to capture more of the room, just in case I somehow left the bed without stepping into view. I also set up my phone across from it, pointing in the opposite direction, hoping that between the two angles I'd catch something, anything that could explain what was going on. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the house, every whisper of wind outside kept me on edge. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me under again, just like before. When I checked the footage the next morning, the same thing had happened. I was there. Then I wasn't. Hours passed with an empty bed, and then I was back again, mouth stained with soil, hands dirty, a new streak of brown across my cheek. But this time, the second camera caught something else. A shadow, barely visible in the far left corner. Not shaped like me, not shaped like anyone I've ever seen. It moved once, slow, almost hesitant, then vanished out of frame. The mornings began to feel heavier, like the air itself was weighed down with something thick and unspoken. Waking up was no longer a relief, but a ritual of dread. I didn't need to touch my face or look in the mirror to know what I'd find. I could feel it the moment my eyes opened, the grainy coating across my tongue, the gritty sensation lodged between my teeth, the metallic, earthy tang at the back of my throat. Sometimes it was dry, almost like sand, but more often it was damp, clinging to the insides of my cheeks like something that had been packed in there deliberately. I started keeping tissues and bottles of water by my bed, knowing I'd need them the second I woke. I'd sit up and cough, hacking up little clumps of soil, dark and wet like they'd just been dug from the ground. The taste made me gag, but it wasn't just the flavor. It was the feeling that this dirt didn't belong in a bedroom, that it didn't belong inside me. I spat into the sink one morning and saw a small pebble fall from my mouth, clicking against the porcelain. Another time, it was a twisted root, thin and white, like it had been pulled from the earth still alive. It was more than just my mouth now. My nails were always caked with mud when I woke. I began to notice the brown smudges on my skin, streaks of soil running down my arms or across my chest, like I had been digging or crawling. I started taking pictures every morning, documenting the changes. One morning there was dirt under my toenails, another a clump of moss tangled in my hair. It wasn't possible, not in my clean, locked apartment, but it kept happening. No matter what I did, no matter how many times I scrubbed the floors, locked the windows, or cleaned myself before bed, I'd always wake up filthy. It didn't stop there. My sheets began to show signs too, brown stains near the edges, smears, like someone had dragged their hands or feet across the fabric. The mattress developed a faint but persistent earthy smell, like damp leaves and decaying wood. I tried to wash it out. I even flipped the mattress and changed everything out, but the scent returned within days, stronger than before. I started. to dread going to sleep, knowing what I'd wake up to. Some mornings it felt like the dirt was trying to tell me something. It wasn't just random soil, it had texture, layers, even patterns. One morning I found 3 small stones placed in a row on my nightstand, perfectly aligned. I didn't put them there. Another day, a feather dusted with soil lay on my pillow. I didn't own anything like it. I didn't know what to make of these things. It felt ritualistic, intentional, like someone or something was leaving me clues or warnings. The worst part was the smell. Not just in my bed, but on my skin, in my hair, on my clothes. I began to notice it even after multiple showers. A heavy, earthy scent that clung to me, no matter what soap I used. My co-workers started commenting. Someone asked if I'd been camping. Another joked that I smelled like an old basement. I laughed it off, but inside I felt sick. I hadn't been near the woods in months. I hadn't left the city limits in ages. The dirt wasn't from here. It smelled too old, too deep, like it came from somewhere forgotten. I became hyper-aware of everything around me. The way my feet left. Faint prints on the floor even though I hadn't stepped outside. The way little flakes of soil would fall from my hair when I brushed it. My apartment was no longer a place of rest. It was a contamination zone. A place where the rules of reality no longer applied. The 4th night after setting up the 2nd camera, I noticed something different the moment I woke up. My mouth was filled with the usual soil, but it was heavier this time, wetter. It clung to my gums and lips like it had been packed in deliberately. I spat it out into the sink, watching flecks of dark mud swirl down the drain. But something about it felt worse, more intrusive, more intentional. My sheets were soaked through at the edges, damp, like they'd been dragged through dew-covered grass. My skin was cold, and not the kind of cold you get from the night air, but something deeper, something that felt like it came from underground. I didn't even bother to wash off before grabbing the camera. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the footage, fast-forwarding past the early hours until I found it. 2:31 a.m. I was in bed, motionless, when something shifted in the frame. It wasn't me. It was in the corner, near the door. At first, it was just a shadow, a dark smear against the wall that seemed to pulse and move slightly, even though the rest of the room was still. Then, without warning, the shadow stretched, forming a shape. Tall, narrow, and impossibly thin. It was hard to describe. It wasn't just tall, it was wrong. Like its limbs were too long, its movements too smooth, like it wasn't subject to the rules of gravity or bone. It moved toward the bed in jerks, like each frame caught it in a slightly new position, but never the actual motion. The blanket didn't move, the floor didn't creak. It leaned over me impossibly slowly, its arms unfolding in a silent arc. Then, in one frame, I was gone. The figure straightened up, holding something in its arms. It was carrying me. My limbs hung loosely like I was unconscious, or worse. The figure turned toward the door, which never opened, and passed through the frame like smoke slipping through a crack. The timestamp kept running. 4 hours passed. Nothing else appeared. Then, at 5:48 a.m., the figure returned, still holding me. It laid me gently on the bed, tucking the blanket back over my shoulders with a motion that was oddly careful, almost tender. It lingered for a moment, one long finger tracing the outline of my face, and then gone. Just like that. The frame was still. I was still. But everything felt different. Watching it back made my skin crawl, not just because of what I saw, but because of how familiar it looked. The way it touched me, the way it carried me. It didn't feel like the first time. I rewound the footage and watched it again, this time slowing it down, pausing every frame. When the figure leaned over me, I tried to catch a glimpse of its face, but there was nothing. No eyes, no features. Just smooth, stretched skin over a long, angular skull, but its presence filled the room like smoke in a closed space. It made the shadows deeper, the air heavier, and it moved like it had done this before, not once. Many times. I didn't know what scared me more, the figure itself or the realization that this had likely been happening long before I ever started recording. That for weeks, maybe months, something had been coming into my room at night, silently, lifting me from my bed, taking me somewhere, doing something I couldn't remember. and bringing me back before sunrise. Every mark, every smear of dirt, every moment of missing time, it all pointed back to that thing. And there was one more detail I hadn't noticed the first time. When it carried me back, I wasn't limp like before. My head tilted slightly. My mouth opened, and a thick clump of soil fell from my lips onto the pillow. The smell of earth was now part of my life. It lingered on my clothes, in my breath, soaked into the fibers of my bed. Nothing I did could remove it. I changed soaps, switched laundry detergents, even began sleeping on the floor with a plastic cover beneath me. But the dirt followed, always fresh, always damp. The footage didn't offer answers anymore. It only added to the dread. Each night I disappeared. Each morning I returned, colder, dirtier, more tired. I had no memory of where I'd been or what had happened to me during those blank hours. The figure in the footage appeared on different nights, never predictable, never consistent, and yet always with the same goal: to take me somewhere and return me before dawn. I became obsessed with finding out where it took me. The idea of losing hours every night, of being moved like a lifeless object, hollowed out my thoughts during the day. I stopped going to work. I shut off my phone. I stopped answering the door. Every moment was focused on watching, planning, waiting. I installed a third camera in the hallway, and then a fourth on the balcony, hoping to track the path. I even set up a motion-triggered alarm near my doorframe. Nothing helped. The footage always showed the same thing: me vanishing, the figure passing without opening doors or disturbing objects, and my return, limp, unconscious, dirty. On a particularly cold morning, after a night I couldn't recall, I found something different near my bed. It was a small wooden box, old and weathered, about the size of a shoebox. It sat just beneath the window, as if placed there deliberately. My name was scratched into the lid, not written, but carved deep into the wood with something jagged. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. The wood was damp. It smelled like rot and time, like it had been pulled from deep underground. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for hours, too afraid of what I might find inside. When I finally lifted the lid, the first thing I noticed was the lining: dark, velvet-like fabric, frayed at the edges and damp with soil. Inside were a few strange objects: a small rusted key curved like it belonged to something ancient, a photograph so faded it was nearly blank, though the outline of a figure, tall and thin, was still visible at the edge, a withered flower, crumbling to dust the moment I touched it, and a note, folded neatly, buried beneath the others. I unfolded it slowly, afraid the paper might tear apart. The handwriting was sharp and crooked, as if written in haste or by a hand unused to letters. There were only 5 words: "You belong to the earth." I read those words over and over, trying to make sense of them. My heart pounded in my chest. The message wasn't threatening. It felt final, like a sentence already passed. The box was no accident. It had been left for me, a token, a reminder, a warning. I tried to tell myself it was a prank or a mistake, that someone was messing with me, but the truth hung heavy in the air. I could feel it deep inside my bones. This wasn't just something happening to me. It was something I was becoming a part of. Later that day, I examined the box more closely. I realized the dirt packed into its corners matched the soil I found in my bed, the same color and texture, filled with the same tiny bits of root and stone. It didn't come from anywhere nearby. I had it tested anonymously through a lab I found online. When the results came back, they were baffled. The soil composition didn't match any known sample from my region. It was older, with traces of decayed organic matter, clay and minerals that suggested it had been buried deep, far below the surface, untouched for centuries. It was only after I received the soil test results that the dreams began. They didn't come in fragments or fade upon waking. They were vivid, unrelenting, and filled with the same oppressive sense of dirt and depth that now ruled my waking life. Every night I dreamed I was buried, not in a coffin, but directly in the earth, as if the ground had swallowed me whole. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't breathe properly. The soil pressed against every inch of my body, cold, wet and heavy, like it had a will of its own. I could feel tiny roots wrapping around my limbs, sliding over my skin, slowly creeping inside my nose, my ears, my mouth. In the dreams, I wasn't alone. I could feel others around me, below me, beside me, above me. I never saw their faces, but I felt their presence like whispers brushing against my skin. Some had been there for a long time. I could sense it in the stillness of their bones, the way their bodies no longer resisted the soil. Others were newer, more frantic, still thrashing and gasping in the dark. We were all part of something, connected, held in place not by wood or stone, but by the earth itself, tight and unyielding. When I woke up from the first dream, I found my hands clenched so tightly around my bedsheets that my nails had torn through the fabric. My mouth was packed with dirt again, but this time it was worse. There were fragments of something else, bits of dried leaves, maybe bark, and something sharp, a sliver of bone, no longer than my fingertip, lodged between my teeth like a splinter. I held it in my palm for an hour, watching how it looked under the light. It was old, smooth, weathered. I kept it in a drawer, unsure what else to do. The dreams continued every night, each one more intense than the last. In one I saw a field, vast, quiet and overgrown. It looked abandoned, but I felt drawn to it like I had been there before. In the dream, I knelt in the center of the field and began to dig with my bare hands. The ground was soft, almost welcoming. I clawed through layers of soil until I uncovered something, a wooden mask, ancient and cracked, carved with strange symbols I didn't recognize. As I reached out to touch it, the ground gave way beneath me, and I fell. Not fast, not suddenly, but slowly, like I was being pulled. I sank into the earth, watching the light above get smaller and smaller. Sometimes I wake up with bruises on my arms or shoulders, faint but clearly shaped like fingers. I check the cameras, desperate for answers, but the footage remains the same. I disappear, I return. The figure lingers, the bruises never appear on screen. They arrive only in the mornings, as if placed by invisible hands. One night I stayed awake as long as I could, sitting up in bed with the lights on and a knife clutched in my hand. But no matter how hard I tried, my body eventually gave in. Sleep took me. The next morning, the knife was gone, replaced with a clump of moss still wet with dew. I no longer feel safe in my own skin. There are moments when I catch my reflection and don't recognize the person looking back. My eyes seem darker, my skin paler. My nails grow faster than they should, thick and chipped as if clawing through something rough each night. I've stopped going outside. The light feels harsh now, unnatural. I keep the windows covered and the doors locked, but deep down I know it doesn't matter. Whatever this is, whatever has chosen me, it doesn't need an open door. It doesn't come from outside. It comes from below.